What's up, guys? Been a long time since I filmed. Hope you all have been well. Today's video, we're finally going to be changing the clutch on my car. I was driving it on Sunday and my clutch got real soft, so it's time to stop fucking around. This thing needs to be addressed. So I got the car up in the air, got her as high up as I could get it. That gives me plenty of room to squeeze under here. I've got batteries disconnected already. So my first plan of attack here is going to be getting in the cab. I got to get the shifter out. I got to get all the trim out, the boot out, basically take care of everything up here first. And then I'm gonna crawl underneath the car, take off the exhaust, or at least a section of exhaust I have to take off so I can drop the trans out, get the drive shaft out. I'm gonna drain the trans oil, and then we're just gonna go piece by piece. If you look at my clutch fluid, you can see, I mean, it's dark. So that's a good sign that this thing is junk. It needs to be changed. I got all my parts laid out right here. So this is a mid-weight flywheel, Z1. I was gonna get the lightweight, but they didn't have it in stock, so I ended up going with the mid-weight. I've got pressure plate and my 6-puck clutch, sprung hub, Z-Speed heavy-duty CSC. I was gonna get the Z-Speed C-Mac kit, but it doesn't work with this clutch. I didn't know that until after I ordered it, so I went this route. I've heard really good things about this, so we're gonna give this a shot. New master cylinder, since, as you saw, the fluid's really dark and it's garbage. New trans oil, MT85, the best you could buy. Mold tool, RBF 600 for the clutch fluid. And then here's my pilot tool and my pilot bushing. So everything's laid out here. It's quite simple. Clutches are actually kind of easy. They're more intimidating than they actually are. You'll see as I go through this in the video. Anybody with any mechanical knowledge can do this. It's really not a big deal. So I'm gonna get in the car and I'm gonna get the shifter out. We're just gonna go piece by piece and we're gonna go from there. So let's get to it. All right, so to take this cover off, it's pretty easy. Pops right out of place. And then to get these clips off, you got a little clip here. This one has two because I have the Synchro Rev Match. If you have like a base model or a lower trim, you're just gonna have the hazard light ones. So this one, I could tell this was never taken apart before because it's got the tape on it. So peel that tape back, and just like that. Now, the shift knob, I've heard from many people these things can be really hard to take off. So chances are you're probably going to destroy this. I'm going to try to save it, but I doubt that it's going to get saved. This is just a pipe wrench. I'm going to try this first, and then if not, I'll try a pair of channel locks. I guess they use like Loctite on these from factory. They could be a real son of a bitch to take off. There we go. And just like that, shift knob is off. And you can actually see on the threads, they did use Loctite on here. That's all that blue stuff that's coming off. I don't know why they would do that. This one I didn't have to mangle too bad, but I'm gonna end up swapping this anyway, so we don't need that. So now I'm completely free here. So now there's gonna be 4 bolts, all 10 millimeter, 1, 2, 3, 4. You gotta pop those off. This whole cover will come off, and then you're golden. Then you're basically done in here and you can drop the trans out from underneath. So we're gonna pop those 4 bolts out, and then I'm gonna crawl underneath and we're gonna see what we're looking at. All right, so let's pop these bolts out. And like I said, all these are 10 mil. I think everything in this job, you're gonna use a majority of 10 millimeter, 14 millimeter, and 15 millimeter. I might be wrong on that, but I have a feeling that's probably gonna be a majority of what this is. So it's pretty self-explanatory. I'm gonna get all these loosened up. I'm also gonna pop, because I see this right here, I'm gonna pop these 2 tabs and get this wire, or whatever this is, out of the way. I think this is the wire that goes for the infotainment system through the glove box. So I'm gonna get that out of the way, and then I'll bring the camera back once I have all this loosened up. All right, so the 4 bolts are out. These back 2 were a little tough to get to. Luckily, I have this fancy wobble extension, which gave me a little bit of room. I was able to get in there and sneak those out. So now I got the clips popped out. This should just come right out. It's a little bit tight in here, so you might have to kind of finagle it a little bit, but it'll come out. Just like that. So now you're looking right at the shifter and you're looking at the ground. So for those who want to install a short throw shifter, this is exactly where you would do it. This is what you would be looking at. You would take this whole shifter assembly apart, and there would be like a little cylinder and a rod that would go down here. We're not going to do that today, but this is basically as far as you have to go up top. So now we get to crawl underneath the vehicle. I'm going to pull this boot off so I can give you a better idea of what a short throw would be. So this is what I'm talking about. A short throw shifter would be like a smaller, this little gimbal ball in here, that would be different, and this whole assembly would be different. So you'd pop these three off, but we're not doing that today. So now we're all good up here. So now I get to crawl underneath, take the exhaust off. I'm gonna crawl underneath and we're gonna see what we're looking at. But at the very least, the exhaust and the drive shaft are gonna have to come off. So I'm gonna crawl underneath the car and I'll bring the camera down there and I'll show you what we're looking at. All right, so now we're underneath the car. And now that I'm looking, I think we can get away with, this is gonna have to come out. You can see there's a bunch of sensors and stuff on the trans. I'll work on getting those unplugged. But I think really this is just gonna have to come out, and probably just these curve pipes here, like this one and this one. And I think I can just kind of, I'm gonna have to pull this too, but I think I can just drop the trans off right from there. So once this comes out, here's your clutch line. I'm gonna have to disconnect that. I'll worry about all that later. Once I get all these connectors unplugged and all that and get this exhaust part out of it, but I think I can get away with leaving the test pipes in. We'll figure it out. I'm gonna start with getting these pieces out here and just kind of going one by one, and then we'll see what we're looking at. But you can actually see, like, up inside there is inside of the car. And then I'm gonna have to get the drive shaft out. I'm not sure how this drive shaft comes out. There should be bolts or something somewhere. I'll figure that out too. So we're gonna go piece by piece, and we're just gonna keep hacking away. So let's get to it. Oh wow, it actually doesn't look that bad. That's not bad at all. Wow, I figured it'd be a lot darker. It's definitely stinky, but it really doesn't look that bad. Alright, so you're going to want that to drain. If you're going to, because when I go to pull this drive shaft, when I pull this shaft out the back of the trans, a bunch of oil is going to come out of here if you don't drain it. I might still get a little residual oil, but it's not going to pour out of there. But it doesn't matter, because I mean, I'm going to be changing the oil anyway. You could do this without changing the oil, but you know, you're already in here, so you might as well. So those are 14. I got this fancy ratchet that the head swivels just like that, so this is going to be perfect for me to get up in there, because I can set the head like this and then I can get in there and get it turned, because that top bolt is going to be a little tough. So let's try this out. Oh, beautiful. Okay, so that's one. So now I'm going to do the same thing to the other pipe, and then I'll bring the camera back once it comes time to get the drive shaft out. All right. So for your drive shaft bolts, it's all going to be nut and bolted. So bolt nut. These are all 17 mils. I got this thing in gear to keep the drive shaft from spinning. If you don't have it in gear, it's going to be in neutral. You're going to be fighting it. So I put it in gear just to get these bolts out. I already loosened them up, and then they just come right out. And then once the drive shaft comes down, it should just slide out. I've got a heat shield here that I might have to bend a little bit, but it's no big deal. Yeah, see, so just like that, drive shaft, yeah, it's gonna slide right out. So, out she comes. Just like that. Wow, this seems really light. Nice and easy. So you can see right there is the yoke that goes right into the back of the trans, and since I've got it empty, I'm not leaking oil out of there. So super easy, not bad at all. Let me see how my U-joints feel. U-joints feel okay. Cool. So we're golden. So now we can go back up to the transmission and start unplugging stuff. So I'm gonna bring the camera back over there, and we're just gonna keep rolling here. All right, so now we're back under the car, or back by the transmission rather. So 202 sensor plugs. You could see way up there, like this right here, cuts off from like the main vehicle harness way up there. I don't know if you could see where my finger's pointing, and it's connected to this bracket. There's a couple sensors back here. There is one here, and then one right here where my finger's at. It never hurts to just like take your cell phone and take a video on how the wires are routed, what's plugged into where. So I'm gonna do that, and then I I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna unplug these harnesses, and then I'm just gonna take these little brackets off. Like there's one here, there's one here. I'm gonna cut these zip ties, just get all these brackets off, and then I can just lay this harness off to the side. And then I'll probably I'll take this off too. I'm gonna leave this back trans mount right here so that it's being supported by the back. And then I can go around, take all the bell housing bolts out. And then once I have all that done, I can just get the trans jack resting on the bottom, get it ratchet strapped to the jack, and then I can pull this out, and then it'll be ready to come out. So we're getting pretty close. I'm thinking in the next hour or so we can have this trans out. So I'm gonna set up the camera. It's gonna be really hard for me to kind of set up unplugging all this stuff, but that's why I kind of just went through it so you guys can get the gist of it. It's pretty simple. Just unplug everything, loosen up these brackets, lay it off to the side. I'll just set up the camera and I'm just gonna keep hacking away at this, man. So we're getting pretty close. This has been pretty easy so far, so let's just keep rolling. Alright, so the hardest connector by far, there's one, if you look at that wire that goes way up there, there's a connector on the side of the trans. You can just barely see the bottom. It's really hard to reach your hand up there. So if you've got a friend that's got tiny little hands and he can help you, it'd be a blessing. I don't have it unplugged yet. I'm still working at it, but I'm gonna get it. So just give me a minute here. I can just feel the tab, but I need to push it down and back at the same time. I don't know how the hell I'm gonna do that. Alright, so I managed to get that sensor up there unplugged. What I did was I loosened up and I took this bracket out. You have access to this bolt and that bolt, but this inner bolt you can't see. You kind of just have to, you know, finger a socket on there, feel it out, and then once you break that loose with those two out, you can swivel this and you can fit your hand up here. I'm not gonna lie, that was a little bit tough, but I'm glad that's done. So now I'm just gonna double check, make sure everything's unplugged. I could lay this off to the side and start loosening up some bolts. All right, so I got all my lines disconnected. You can see I got the harness laying off to the side here. I'm not gonna lie, man, there's a lot more plugs on this transmission than I thought. But I got it nice and out of the way, so now you can see all the bell housing bolts. I took the vent tube off, which is way up there, it just slides right on and off. But we're looking pretty good. I think what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna pull this bracket, get that out of the way, and then I gotta pull the clutch line still, so I'll pull that, get some of the fluid out of there, and then I can get the trans jack under here and kind of start getting this thing ready to pull. And now that I got it drained, you can actually see in the bottom of there, all that's deteriorated plastic and rubber. I mean, look at that. It's disgusting. Alright guys, so clutch line's undone, all these brackets are gone, wiring harness is tied out of the way, the transmission's completely free now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start loosening bolts, and I took this piece of cardboard here, you can see I labeled it top and B for bottom, and I'm just gonna go around, you know, like I'm gonna loosen one bolt and put it in its close accordance. These bolts are going to be really long because those are the starter bolts. And I'm thinking that once I loosen those up, I could just push the starter forward and I should be good. So we're going to figure that out. But I'm going to go around and I think there's 14 bolts total. And once I get to like the last bolt, like I'm probably going to leave these two in right here because they're easy to access. So probably those two and then the two on the right side. So there will be 4 bolts left. That's when I'll get my trans jack under here, get it underneath the trans, and then I'm gonna put a ratchet strap over the top of it so it doesn't fall. And then I can loosen up those 4 bolts, pull this cross member out, and then the trans should come right out. So we're pretty close. So just as I suspected, these 2 bolts right here, these 2 real long ones, go to the starter. And I've actually got the starter. I was able to push it forward and lay it out of the way. You can see the flange of it right there, so that's beautiful. So I'm gonna label these 2 bolts for the starter because all these other ones are gonna be shorties. But yeah, let's keep hacking away at it. All right, so all my bell housing bolts are out. You can see I just went one by one up there all the way around. I've got my trans jack underneath the trans, and I'm using a ratchet strap just wrapped around the trans to make sure it doesn't fall on me. You're gonna see when we go to put this trans back in, there's multiple ways you could do this. You could use a regular floor jack to get it out, you could bench press it out, whatever. But a trans jack is optimal because it's got all these little adjustments. You can fine tweak it up, left, right, down, because this trans has to be perfectly matched to get it back in position. You don't, like, the splines have to match up perfectly, and this is perfect because you can do fine little tweaks. But I'm gonna set up the camera now. I'm gonna remove this cross beam, and this trans should come right out, hopefully. So I double checked everything. I made sure everything was loose. I got through everything, make sure nothing was plugged in. The trans is free, so hopefully once I drop this out, the trans should just drop right out, but we'll see. So I'm gonna set up the camera and we're gonna get rolling, so let's do it. Oh, that it? I think that's it. Right, now we're getting somewhere. So here is obviously the clutch. OEM, you can tell it's old, and I haven't, well, that's the pressure plate. I haven't gotten to the clutch disc yet. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. And then inside the trans, the concentric slave is wiped out on this thing. So it's definitely good I got this in when I did. So I'm gonna start tearing this thing apart. And once I get this pressure plate off and the clutch out, I'll show you what it looks like. All right, so here's the clutch. This isn't the worst clutch I've ever seen, but it's also not the best either. It's not quite worn down to rivets yet, but it's getting pretty close. You could tell if you look at this pressure plate, all this discoloration, those are hot spots, which is no good. This clutch has gotten hot, and there have been a couple times back when I was racing when I'd be ripping through gears and this thing would slip real bad. Well, you can tell. So definitely glad we're getting rid of this old OEM junk. Everything's going pretty smooth so far. It's kind of hard to film under there because I've got the trans just kind of pushed back. So I'm going to try to film as best as I can, but the next plan of attack is getting the flywheel off. And then once I get the flywheel off, we're just going to go from there. So let's keep rolling. All right, so I got the flywheel off. It's T55 Torx. It's laying over there. There's 8 of them. And the key is to go, you don't want to go like 1, 2. You want to go across from each one. And then once you get the flywheel off, you're gonna have to wiggle it off of the crank. This right here is a nice little pilot bushing puller. There's a couple ways you could do this. The old school way is you take bread and grease and you stuff it in that hole and use a hammer and a punch to get it out. This is new school and this works way better. Just this little puller. So basically the little teeth go inside the bushing. You tighten this rod, it squeezes them out to grab it, and then you just tighten this nut and you see it just walks right out. And this nut's a 19 millimeter. It's almost out now. Yep, see, there it goes. Nice and easy. This right here is your rear main seal, this seal around here. Usually when you're in here doing a clutch, you always want to change it. I'm not going to worry about it because mine's not leaking. This is just dust right here. This isn't oil. And I only have 60,000 miles. If I was closer to like 100,000, I would for sure be changing this. But I'm not going to worry about this seal. So now I'm going to clean all this up. But before I do that, I want to get that hunk of shit out of there. I gotta get a Torx pick to remove it, and then I think those are two 10mm holding it inside the bell housing. So I'm gonna get that out, get that swapped, and then I'll bring the camera back for when I'm putting the flywheel up. Right, so I used a little bit of brake cleaner to clean it up since I'm in here. Definitely doesn't hurt. New pilot bushing is in. All I did, I just used I used that puller to get the old one out, and then a rubber mallet, and I just pounded that one in. And then I used the old one as a guide to get it seated. So now, when I go to put this new flywheel up here, if you look, there's a tit on this crankshaft. There's a little hole on the flywheel that has to line up. If you don't line those up, you'll have a crank no start. Because if you look, there's a relector wheel on the new flywheel. That sensor reads off that relector wheel. I actually I know somebody that got a G37 for really cheap because the guy put a clutch in it, wouldn't start after that. And that's why, because the flywheel was misaligned, so it would just crank, 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 no start. So anyway, I'm gonna get this flywheel mocked up here, get it on here, and just kind of snug these bolts up before I torque them. I got the heavy duty CSCs in here. That was super easy. 2 bolts that goes right in. Hoses come right out the side there. So let's get this flywheel in here, and then I'll get everything torqued, and then we can put the clutch up, and then it's almost time to put the trans back in, so let's keep rolling. All right, flywheel's up. It was pretty nice and easy. I've got all the bolts are torqued, and I wrote the date in there, July of 2023, in case if I end up doing this clutch again, or if I sell the car and somebody else does it, they know when this was changed. And then I went ahead and I dotted each one of these whenever I torqued it. They torqued to 65 foot-pounds, and they advised to put a little bit of Loctite on there, so I Loctited them all, tightened them all down. And yeah, so the flywheel's done. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some brake cleaner, clean the surface of this with some brake clean and a rag, and then I could put the clutch up and then the pressure plate, and then I got to torque the pressure plate. Same thing, it wants a little Loctite on the bolts, and then you do 2 sequences. So it's going to be 11 foot-pounds, and then it's going to be 29 or 30 foot-pounds, give or take. And it's going to be the same thing. So you're going to go like 1 here, then that one, then this one, then that one. Like, you want to go across, not all the way around. So I'm gonna get the clutch and the pressure plate up there, and then we can get this trans back in here. And just like that, the new clutch is installed. She sure does look pretty. So basically, it's like I was saying earlier, you know, you just go crisscross, 11 foot-pounds first, then 30. I dotted each bolt. Like, the first dot was when I did the initial torque, which was the 11 foot-pounds. The second dot was when I did the 30. And I just went around the whole thing again just to double check and make sure it's all tight, it's all good. The big key here is you want to make sure that your pilot tool is free. You know, you can just easily pull it in and out, because if there's any resistance here, you're not going to get that transmission back in. So my suggestion would be, as you're doing your sequence, just kind of like play with this a little bit, you know, pull it in and out, give it, you know, so that way you can make sure it's 100% square. Like, this is going in and out no problem for me. So that means this clutch is perfectly aligned, the trans is ready to go back in. So now I'm gonna bring the trans back into position and start jacking this thing up and see if I can get this transmission in. All right guys, and just like that, she's back in. I didn't record that because it took me about an hour of shimmying and lifting up and moving side to side to get this one in. I'm not gonna lie, as somebody who does this kind of stuff for a living, I'm a mechanic, I've done quite a few transmissions and clutches. This one fought me. This is one of the worst ones I've had because the tolerances are so tight. You have to get it just right. So what I ended up doing was, once I got it real close, you could see I put 1 bolt in on this side and 1 bolt on that side, and I was just kind of rocking it back and forth until it popped right in. You don't want to force these things into position. You want them to go in on their own. And this one was tough, man, I'm not gonna lie, because this trans tunnel is so tight. It was tough, but she's finally in. So now I can go put all the bell housing bolts in, and then basically just reverse all the steps I did earlier. So first I'm gonna put the bell housing bolts in, then I'll get the drive shaft in, put the harnesses on, all that stuff. Another thing is, whenever you're trying to get these things in, when it's real close, like if you can feel it inside of like the clutch disc itself, sometimes all you got to do is just put this thing in gear, you know, like that's first gear, spin this a little bit, and then usually it'll pop right in, because that little bit of turning will get the splines to match up perfectly, and it'll pop right in. That's what I ended up having to do. This one took me a while, but it's finally in, so now I can just start going around, and then once I get all this back together, I can go, I'm going to swap the master, and then I just got to bleed it, and then I got to fill this with oil, and then we can drive her. I'm kind of excited, dude. I can't wait to see how this clutch feels. And just like that, we're all buttoned up. Bell housing bolts, I used German spec, good and tight. Just get them as tight as you can get them all the way around. I laid my harness back on. I put all the bolts back where the brackets were at. I got all the sensors plugged in. So we're golden down here. So now what I'm gonna have to do, well, I'm gonna put the drive shaft in. I'll probably leave the exhaust off for now because I want to get the drive shaft in, and then I'm gonna blow out all the shitty fluid that's in this clutch line right here, hook this one up, and then I'm gonna crack this bleeder and just let it gravity bleed. And then once I start seeing fluid from here, I'm gonna have to bleed the clutch, and then I want to start the car and make sure that this thing goes into gear no problem before I put the whole exhaust back on and finish buttoning everything up, basically. So next step is drive shaft, and then, oh, I gotta fill the trans too. I think I'm gonna stop by like AutoZone or something. Here's the fill plug. I gotta figure out, I need like a pump or something to fill that, so I'll figure that out. So yeah, man, we're getting pretty goddamn close. All right, boys, we are back. I just made a quick stop over at Harbor Freight, pick up one of these transfer pumps. So this should work to fill my trans. So I'm gonna put the bottle right here. The way I see it, it should just go like this. Put this up here into the fill, and then pump away, hopefully. Oh yeah, beautiful. Damn, it drained that bottle that fast? No way. Alright, so that's one bottle. That was faster than I thought it was gonna be. Cool. So now I got 2 more bottles to fill. And then once I do this, I'm gonna go back up top, and we're gonna swap the master. So just rinse and repeat, 3 bottles, fill it up, and then we'll be golden down here, really. Drive shaft's in. I mean, I'm gonna wait on the exhaust. I wanna make sure that everything works, but we're okay. We're doing pretty good now. So I'm gonna fill the trans, and like I said, I'll bring the camera up top. All right, so for the master, I've already got the little reservoir off that sits here. That's the master down there. I got that line loose. So what I'm gonna have to do is come inside the cab, and where that clutch pedal is, it's gonna be kind of tough, but if you look up there, right there, that pin has to come out. Once I get that pin out, it'll take loose the pedal, and then there's 2 12mm bolts in there that I'm gonna have to get out. It's gonna be kind of hard to film, so I'll just bring you guys back once I get it out. All right, so master cylinder's done, filled with fresh fluid. It tells you right on the instructions with the Z-Speed C-Mac, you leave the bleeder underneath cracked and just let it gravity bleed. And once you see oil dripping out of there, you get somebody to sit in the car and pump the clutch so you could bleed the rest of the air out. So I'm all good there. I already bled the clutch. Exhaust is back on. The shifter goes into gear fine, the pedal's nice and stiff. So now I'm gonna bring the camera in the car, we're gonna start it up, make sure that the rear wheels roll with no issue, and then she'll be ready to test drive. All right, so shifts through gears just fine, which is exactly what you want. Clutch is nice and stiff. So now we're gonna start the car. Cool, so that means my alignment pin was good, so I'm all good here. So now, tires will roll. Yep, tires are rolling. So that's first gear. Oh, we are golden. So now we get to take this thing out on a test drive and see how it goes. Oh, that feels good. Nice. All right, so we're in the car. I'm not gonna lie, I'm really surprised how stiff this clutch pedal is now. It's like a whole nother feeling. But it seems to, it's moving fine. I gotta be easy on it for the next like 500 or 600 miles until the clutch is broken in. But it feels good. There may still be a little bit of air in the clutch system, whether it's in the line or if it's in the concentric I drive a little bit, you know, I want to work the clutch a little bit, and then I'm going to try bleeding it again. But so far, so good. No weird noises. The car drives just fine. Really, the only noticeable difference is this clutch pedal. I mean, it's like, there's good resistance on it, which me personally, I love a heavy clutch. But it rose through all the gears just fine. You know, pop in reverse, no issues. But it's definitely like relearning how to drive the car, because the grab is at a different point. It grabs a lot harder. The pedal's a lot stiffer, but it feels good. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video.